Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online. We are here today to celebrate speculative poetry and the release of Eccentric Orbits Vol.4 from Dimension Fold Press, edited by Wendy Van Camp. I'm going to hand it over to Wendy to introduce our poets, and we'll get straight into some speculative poetry.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Van Camp. I'm the Poet Laureate for the city of Anaheim, California, and I'm the editor of Eccentric Orbits. This year is Volume 4, and I'm very pleased to be here to have our first of two launch parties for the anthology. Eccentric Orbits is put out by Dimension Fold Publishing, which is a small press dedicated to speculative poetry. They do support individual poets as well as the anthology. And lately, our publisher, Ken Godsworth, is getting a little bit into New Age and UFOs of all things. But it's all in good fun, and I urge you to have a look at Dimension Fold Publishing if you get a chance. You can find that at dimensionfold.com. We're going to go ahead and get started with our poets today. We have Alan Ashley, Bradley Earle Hoge, Ramona Ridgewell, Lee Garrett, Baruch Bezhala, and Gerald D. Nordley, and Liz Tuckwell reading today. And what I'm going to do is just introduce each poet and let them go ahead and tell you a little bit about themselves and read a selection of their poetry from the anthology. And first up, we have Alan Ashley. Alan, go ahead and mic yourself and let people know who you are.
Okay, hi. I'm Alan Ashley from London, UK. I'm an award-winning editor and writer and also a creative writing tutor. I'm the founder of Clockhouse London Writers Group, amongst some other writers groups. I only have one poem in this. I write loads of SF poetry and fantasy poetry, but I only have one poem in Eccentric Orbits 4. I did only submit one, to be fair. This poem is called Candles. It's an unhealthy glow. My bones are showing through my flesh like I'm a walking X-ray. Don't light a candle. Haven't we had enough brightness already? Flashes that blinded, neutralized our sperm and our ovaries. I find that my skin is increasingly green tinged. That was not a shade from the previous array of human beauty tones. I haven't been able to eat for days. Sips of water taste like tarnished metal. And so it was that he lit the candle, then they lit the candle, and we had to light a candle in response. Megatons of candle wax obliterating, guttering, gutting. No more candles, please. Nothing pleasant to see here. Move along now, if you still have limbs.
Thank you, Alan. That was wonderful. Our next poet is Bradley Earle Hoge.
Hoge. That's easily mispronounced. Thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this and the work you put into this. I have a couple books of poetry. The most recent one was published in January by Vrida, which I think they now have switched the poetry part of their press to Howling Hollows or something like that. I've got a link in my page. I also have a chapter coming out in September, and it's not speculative, so I won't talk too much about that. The book, the two poems that I have in Eccentric Orbits 4, I will read the first one. It's called If I Am a Zombie, and it has a quote from Sean Carroll, who's a physicist. He says, "You don't think you're a zombie, but that's just what a zombie would say." So that's how it begins. If I am a zombie, I would not know it, just as I would not be able to recognize that I am also a holographic projection of a two-dimensional reality. Just as ghosts are absent from the Large Hadron Collider and time's error requires entropy's advance. I do not look at the stoic, static face of God in despair. I write poetry. So that was the first one. They're both kind of pretty short, so I'll go ahead and read both. The second one is Exploding Chaos into Order. I see an empty nest, static of granite, an exchange student hiking this urban landscape, joy and boredom, routine and trepidation, arrogance and insecurity, independence and subjugation. I see shaking tree limbs and flower beds, zebra stripes, faux leather, ostrich skin boots, youth and old age, addiction and release, enterprise and quiet desperation. I see no one I know, nor my reflection. I see only the wave function of the universe, nodding and unraveling in fractal decoherence. And I am the singularity, exploding chaos into order, into complexity, into the struggle for meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. That was wonderful. Our next poet is Ramona Ridgewell. Ramona, go ahead and mic yourself, introduce yourself, and read your selection.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ramona Ridgewell, and I couldn't be more excited about having my sci-fi collections, sci-fi coup collections selected for this anthology. It's my debut, not only as a poet, but as a published author. So I write about vampires. So these are vampire sci-fi coups, or haikus, I guess. And the first one is Vampires Walk at Night. The sun disappears. Moon, stars fill the darkened sky. Vampires walk at night. People out jogging, unaware of the danger. Vampires walk at night. My victim trots by. I nip their neck and they're gone. Vampires walk at night. And the second collection is called Vampire Seasons. Long, long solstice days, hiding alone in my room. Too soon, dawn arrives. The nights grow longer, expanding my hunting hours. Lots of folks out. Ah, long winter nights, plenty of time for the hunt. Nobody outside. Warm days, shorter nights. Vernal equinox arrives. Stomach always full. And that's it. Thank you.
Ramona, thank you. Those poems were really fun. And yes, they are called sci-fi coup, and I can tell you that because that's my specialty. I would know. And I'm delighted that you were able to debut on Eccentric Orbits. As an editor, I always like to include at least one or two debut poets in the collection, because how else do people gain experience? And I think it's a great venue for people to get started with. Anyway, our next poet is Lee Garrett. Lee, if you could unmic yourself and introduce yourself and then read your selection.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Lee Garrett. I'm a teacher based in Derbyshire in England. I'm a writer of mostly sci-fi, fantastical stuff, but my most recent novella was about the Luddites, actually, so I do branch out sometimes. I've been very lucky to have a poem, I think, in every edition so far of this fantastic series. And yeah, lately, my sci-fi poetry, I was a big fan of the Paul Verhoeven Starship Troopers film of the 90s. And I seem to make character, I've got a Starship Trooper as a character, and I seem to just keep doing these poems with him at the center of it. So this is it. It's called Intelligence. Apologies, everyone. It is on the lengthy side, so bear with me. Intelligence by Lee Garrett. One time, oh, sorry, this is a copy, by the way. This is my copy. Oh, it's back to front, isn't it? And I might be blocking my face at times, but I'll read from my copy. One time, we were sent near instantaneously via hyperspace to a planet so distant that by the time we arrived there, centuries had passed in Earth time since we had received intelligence of their hostile intentions. So my family and friends unless they're still alive, augmented perhaps by some future technology, will have lived their entire lives with no further news of me. Such are the sacrifices of a Starship Trooper. On arrival, we had not the luxury to dwell on such matters, a campaign brutal in the planning, where it was emphasised how we must, to stand any chance of departing alive, exercise extreme and rapid ruthlessness. We burst into orbit in individual balls of flame, slammed hard into the ground, swaddled in our exoskeletons, and, for a handful of moments, all was quiet. A frozen, still land, blue and flat. In this vast expanse, the occasional geyser spouted, and in the far distance, an ice-ridged wall of mountains, and there, a distant wall of cloud. But even as we looked, the cloud neared, took shape, a wall of lizards writhing in one body, innumerable, rolling and swarming towards us. Our weapons rained fire on them, each body entwined impossibly around the other, killed thousands, no millions, but still they came as if untouched, the very air dark with their flying forms, the ground so thick with flesh one could have walked miles without ever touching bare ground. All day I fought, nearly all of my comrades lost. I thought myself dead, such was the horde, fought only for what else was there to do? Till a time came when, killing a creature that attacked me so close that I heard it gasp in pain, its eye as it rode, catching mine for a moment. What passed? An incomprehension? A glimpse of the alien? I noticed that there was no more, and then I stopped and looked around for the first time, an endless expanse of the broken and the dying and the dead. We heard, much later, countless space light years away, that our intelligence unit had long since learned that those we'd been sent to fight had been wiped out decades earlier, after the planet's competing life form, a lowly lizard, had made, inexplicably, a sudden evolutionary leap. Still, it was reasoned, better to destroy such formidable fighters sooner rather than later.
Oh, thank you, Lee. Those were wonderful. I'm always glad to have you in our anthology, and you're right, you have appeared in all 4 issues, just like myself. So I hope to see you again next year. Our next poet is Gerald D. Nordley. Gerald, if you could unmic yourself and introduce yourself and read your selection.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. I'm Gerald Nordley. I'm an astronautical engineer, mostly retired now, and inspired by Arthur Clarke, I also write science fiction as G. David Nordley. I've been writing poetry forever, but I haven't published any before except as song lyrics or poems incorporated in various stories. So thank you, Wendy. This poem was written on the occasion of the passing of my brother-in-law, Ray Bruty, who earned his living writing and publishing bicycle trail guides under the pen name of Cosmic Ray. He was the rider who wrote what he rode. He was the traveler who made his own road. He was the peddler who peddled the free, the mountain, the river, the sky, and the sea. He was the father whose dowry we see in every adventure in each far country. He was the fixer whose fixed legacy is the trail to forever in our memory. So.
Oh, thank you, Gerald. And of course, it was a pleasure to meet you at LusCon. And I certainly hope I can talk you into coming back to Eccentric Orbits again next year.
Well, you've got
Oh, that's true. Our last poet is Liz Tuckwell. And Liz, if you could unmic yourself, introduce yourself, and read your selection.
Okay. Hi, I'm Liz Tuckwell. I also come from London, and like Ramona, it's actually my debut in a poetry anthology. I've written short stories and had them published before, but this is my first time as a poet. So these are 3 sci-fi clues, and they're about sci-fi genres. First one is utopian, low impact living, green cities and cleaned up seas, Earth's future regained. dystopian. All is grim, grey, sad. Fierce AIs punish mankind. No hope and no help. And the last one is theme punk. Gears and pistons were clockwork robots and top hats as common as rats.
Excellent, Liz. Thank you very much. And again, I like to say that I always like to seek out debut poets. So sometimes when I get cover letters and people say, oh, I've never published, but here's my work. That's not a bad thing to me as an editor, because I am on the lookout for quality poets that just have been discovered yet. So that's what being an editor is all about. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to hear our poets read out in the audience. And for those of you out on YouTube and other sources, I hope you enjoyed this program. Again, Eccentric Orbits is an anthology of science fiction poetry. Our poets come from all over the world, from all walks of life. And I really feel that this is probably the most diverse of the publications that I've put out so far. We literally have someone from every continent, from, well, maybe not Antarctica, but from Africa to Asia to Europe to America and Australia. And it's really been exciting for me as an editor to read poetry from so many different places and from so many different people. Again, you can find Eccentric Orbits on Amazon. You can buy it directly from the publisher, which is Dimension Fold Publishing at dimensionfold.com. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jean-Paul, who I wish to thank very much for hosting our launch parties. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And of course, I'm just very appreciative that you offer your services to us. Thank you all.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Wendy. Thank you to Wendy Van Camp for editing Eccentric Orbits Volume 4 from Dimension Fold Press. You can find a link to that in the chat. Also, we hope you join us for part 2 of this launch party, which will be happening at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to all of our readers for sharing your wonderful speculative poetry. Thank you, Wendy, and we'll see you all later tonight, hopefully. Have a good one.